Isn't it crazy how music can bring back memories? So tonight I was sitting here going through the YouTube analytics. I've lost 2 subscribers. It's depressing. And I was listening to Pandora, and Breaking Benjamin's latest album, Dark Before Dawn, their song Defeated came on. And music always amazes me as to how it can bring back a memory or take your mind back into a point in time. Because music is a super powerful thing like that. Just like smells, you can smell something and not even intentionally your mind will just snap back to something in the past to remind you of that moment. And the song Defeated came on, and this will probably last forever. That whenever this album came out, right as it came out, I bought it and I was going on a road trip halfway across the country. And I'm not one to really like to drive long trips. I don't like sitting in a cramped car for a long period of time. I love tour buses because you're able to get up and move around, but cars are no good. Anyway, started out on this road trip, and like I said, it was halfway across the country. And this was the first album that I put in the CD player. I just bought it. I was really excited about it. I was really pumped that Breaking Benjamin was coming back. Well, technically, Benjamin Burnley was coming back. The rest of the band was new members. Unimportant. And these songs will always remind me of that trip. I drove the whole, probably 13 or 1,700 miles in 4 days, I think. And it was a grueling drive. But I was driving, and at first, the first hour, I think, of any road trip, for me anyway, is miserable. You're in the car and the time is going by so slow and you haven't seen anything yet and you're just ready for the trip to be over. And that's the way it was for me. I mean, the first hour to say 3 hours were going by and I was done. I was tired of it already. But then I got tired because I left really early in the morning, and it was in the spring, summertime. I was driving along, and after I drove for the whole day, I was just kind of droned out. And then night came, and I had to be at the destination in a short period of time. So I only had 5 days to get there, and I think I did it in 4 because I made it there the night of the 4th night. And I really wish that trip could have been longer, because looking back on it now, there was some amazing things that I seen along the way. When night fell on that first night, I was driving through the northern panhandle of Idaho, and there was mountains everywhere. There's sheer ledges by the highway, and it was dark, and the only thing lighting up anything was the headlights. I was the only car on the road. All you saw was the rocks going by on both sides. And then I remember thinking to myself, it's crazy I haven't seen any wildlife yet. I figured I would see something, a deer or something. And right after having that thought, right next to my car, as I was driving down the right-hand side of the highway, on the left-hand side there was a deer standing right there. And I didn't even have time to see him or slow down. I just drove right past him and saw him out of the corner of my eye. I was thinking, man, that was kind of cool. I mean, I've seen deer all the time, but just in that moment, we're in the middle of the night, and I was the only car out there. I was getting really drowsy, and I was thinking, haven't seen anything. Wham, there was a deer. I didn't hit it, the wham, that misplaced wham. And then, still in Idaho, it was just pitch black except for the headlights. And as I said, there was mountains encompassing the highway, or what seemed to be. And then there was this moment where on the south side of the highway, the mountains just went away, and the highway went on this ledge, so to speak, but it was completely open on the south side for as far as you could see, which wasn't very far because it was nighttime. But I could see this city far below me in the valley. And I think the most beautiful part of that was that there was a clear sky, and the moon was insanely bright, and it just lit up everything in this jaw-dropping bluish white hue. It was truly like a painting, a midnight painting. And I actually slowed down because, of course, I want to focus on the road. I'm already tired, I'm already drowsy, but I just had to look over and see this image that I was driving past. I can't remember where it was or what the city was, and I wish I could because I'd like to see it again one day, but it was just mesmerizing. And that was the moment in the trip. That was, I don't even know how far into the trip, but that was whenever I started to think, this was a good idea. This trip doesn't suck so bad. So I kept driving. I drove through the night, and the northern panhandle of Idaho is quite narrow, so it doesn't take too long to traverse that. And I was driving along, and I made it into Montana. And then the sun rose while I was driving. And then I was heading east, so I was driving into the sunrise. And I got to see the sunrise in Montana, and I was on the west side of this mountain range. And still to this day, I will have that picture in my mind of that mountain range. And even though it was summertime, there was still snow capping the tops of them. And the grass there was so green. There were streams flowing right next to the highway. I had been up at this point for probably 36 hours. I was super tired. I just kept driving because I had that short window. And with something like that, typically, if you have a short window of time, you want to drive as much as you can initially rather than race to the end. You want to race at the beginning and then see where you stand. So that's what I was doing. I was trying to get there quick. All the while, I've been having the Breaking Benjamin album on repeat, just listening to it over and over again. Because the songs at first were new, and I heard the bass drum was turned up a little more from the previous work. And every time you listen to something, you pick up something different. And I was beginning to learn the lyrics at this point, so I was able to sing along with the choruses. And I was able to pick up on the melodies, or we're going to go into a bridge here, and I was able to enjoy the songs, really sit down into them rather than just listen to them and figure them out initially. So I had that album on repeat. I had it playing over and over again. Defeated, the song that came on tonight, Pandora. That song in particular, that one and Close to Heaven will be those two songs that always remind me of Montana and that drive. So I was going down the highway in Montana. I had made it through the night. The sun was coming up, and I was able to start seeing things, and I was thinking, man, I'm really tired. Like I said, I'd been up for a really long time at this point. So I figured I'm going to stop. I can't remember the name of the place that I stopped. I'm horrible at names. But I stopped at this place that was literally about 3 hours from anywhere. And it had a shit ton of hotels. And I'm thinking, okay, yeah, here's a place, I can get me a nice hotel. I can rest for the night and then hit it again and drive for another 36 hours the next day. I'm not kidding. Every single room apparently was booked. I called every hotel. Nobody had an opening. So that sucked. So anyway, I ended up parking the car and just trying to rest for a little bit in this parking lot. And I was thinking, wow, maybe I'd get a small taste of the whole van life movement that's going on. If you haven't heard about that, it's where people don't have houses. They live in their vehicles and they travel. I might do another video about that because a big part of that is super inspiring and super enticing. So maybe we'll talk about that in the future. So I wasn't able to sleep. I was laying in an uncomfortable car. I just felt super weird taking a nap in the driver's seat of this car in this parking lot. So after about a couple hours of just laying there and trying to sleep and nothing happening, and then hearing the world start to wake up around you, people driving and everything, it wasn't easy to sleep. I just got a coffee, about 4 energy drinks, and hit the road again. And I gotta say, I'm glad that I didn't have the opportunity to sleep, because the things that I seen driving again were unbelievable. One of my ideas after that trip, maybe whenever I get older or whatever position I end up in the next 20 or 30 years, part of me wants to move out to the area in Montana that I drove through and just buy a bunch of land, buy 80 to 200 acres or so, and just live out there and be able to embrace that beauty every day. Where I live now is super beautiful, so it's a mix-up, The grass is always greener on the other side, which in this situation, the grass really was greener there. Wow, that was some green grass. But as I was driving, there was these streams going right next to the highway. You were able to see through the water, which wasn't necessarily new to me because you can do that where I live. But it was a different place. It was unknown to me, and it was beautiful. As I was driving, there was cabins offset off the highway, and the streams went through their property, and there was trees around, but mostly it was just flat open area, kind of silhouetted with this mountainscape if you looked off into the distance. And then there was this mountain range that I came up to. I saw it for a long time while I was driving. I think, well, that's beautiful. But it looked like a small mountain range. It looked like it wasn't going to be anything to really get through. There was this tiny, tiny town. I pulled off to get something to eat and to get some gas. whenever I was walking back to the car, I actually looked to the northwest. The entire time, I hadn't even noticed that there was this small area relative to mountains of a cluster of mountains that just stuck up out of nothing, or appeared to be. I mean, there was no other mountains around it. It didn't slowly trickle down into the plains. It was just these mountains. And they weren't rocks like what you'd see in Arizona. They were actual sharp mountains sticking up out of the ground. And I paused and just stared at them, because this was the first time I'd ever seen something like that. To rewind just a little bit, I've always thought that it's important to take a moment and embrace the sights that we see. If you see something that is just jaw-dropping, take a moment, really soak it in. Don't get too caught up in living that you forget to truly live. The only thing that makes up life is experiences. So during this trip, it started where I was tired of it. I didn't want to do it, and it had turned into a very short period of time to something that I was almost unable to believe myself. So I got gas, got something to eat, got back in the car, and I was driving down the highway again. I was coming up to this mountain range that I saw, and then the highway turned, and then I started heading away from him, and I was thinking, well, this is weird. I didn't expect this to happen, because everything kind of cleared off to the northeast, and I thought sure that the mountain range covered up everything. And I drove for probably 3 more hours before I reached this mountain range. And it blew my mind, because I could see it the entire time. I could see the mountains. They seemed like they were right there, less than an hour away. And 3 hours it took me to drive from where I was to where they were. And then I was getting into them. I was making the climb, getting ready to go up over the pass, as I thought. It was a pretty steep climb, so the car didn't like that at all. It was crying. As I made it up over what I thought was the pass, I realized that everything just kind of looked the same. It wasn't a pass. The road went up, and then there was more flat ground and more mountains. But I was in the mountain range at this point, and I'd never seen plains and mountains so close to each other. And I drove in that mountain range for, I think, about 4 hours. I couldn't believe how long it took me to drive through that mountain range, because the entire time it felt like it was going to be over any moment. I was going to be through them and on to, at that point I was going to go south down into Wyoming. And if any of you have seen a beautiful part of Wyoming, tell me about it, because I haven't seen a beautiful part of Wyoming. Wyoming was miserable. It was full of road construction. Stop, go, stop, go, stop, go. Slow, fast, stop, go, slow, fast. It was freaking horrible. So I couldn't get through Wyoming fast enough. It was good that I just had to cut the corner off of it. And then I went into South Dakota. This is the 3rd day now, and I've only stopped once to try to rest, and it didn't work. But I was driving through South Dakota after making it through Wyoming, and at this point I had shut the radio off. I'd listened to the new Breaking Benjamin album, I don't even know how many times on repeat. It gave me the time and the peace and the clarity while driving through South Dakota to really take in what I had just seen, what I had just driven through. And although I hate road trips, and I've always hated road trips, because, like I said, I don't like sitting in a tiny car. I'm 6 feet tall, so sitting in a tiny car doesn't really work out for me all that well. That one trip made it to where I would eagerly go on another road trip, regardless of how uncomfortable it is. Well, I don't want to say regardless, because, if it's really hell, then that... But in the time when I was in Idaho and over into Montana, I saw some of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in my life, unexpectedly. And I just urge you that if you have the opportunity, go up there to Montana or go over to Idaho or really go anywhere. Don't start the trip with the mindset of just getting from A to B. I did that. I was miserable for the first few hours. I just wanted to be there, just wanted it to be done. And whenever I got to B, I really wish the trip would have been longer. Granted, I had to drive back, but then again, I had to drive back in a manner of that one was 4 days, 5 days, something like that. So it was, again, a quick trip. But if you go anywhere, just try to take a moment to embrace the things that you see. Look for the sights that your eyes wouldn't naturally go to. You really get into a tunnel on the highway. Driving safely, of course. Glance around. See where you are. see the world that you are in. I don't think you'll be disappointed. Thank you guys very much for watching this. I just wanted to take the time, after that song came on Pandora, Defeated, off Breaking Benjamin's newest album, Dark Before Dawn, it really sparked that memory in me. And hopefully I was able to translate it from my mind through words to you guys in a way where maybe you could appreciate that road trip. Maybe I was able to paint the picture in your mind. I appreciate y'all being here. We'll see you next time.